I am Bill Murphy. I'm the label manager with Cantaloupe Music under the auspices of Bang on a Can. Well, you don't have to applaud that. We are here to celebrate the imminent release of David Handler's debut album, Life Like Violence. Now you can applaud. There's a certain bold and provocative flavor to that title, especially in these times. David himself has said that he meant to explore the everyday tumult of the mind. And I think that's something we can all relate to. But also, to me, this is a project about celebration, the creative impulse, the quest for knowledge, the freedom of musical experimentation, and maybe most importantly, the spirit of collaboration. I'm guessing quite a few of you here know David personally. Maybe you met him for the first time at Le Poisson Rouge. That's the downtown music venue he co-founded in 2008. Is that correct? Okay. I can tell you that I met him personally for the first time at LPR. I'd like to tell you a quick story about how that happened. I was there for a show that featured Mantra Percussion. They were performing an hour-long piece by Michael Gordon, who I believe is here. It's called Timber. Very ambient, trance-like, psychedelic piece of music that goes on for about an hour. It's 6 percussionists standing in a circle playing 2x4s cut to various lengths known as samantras. Mantra was opening for Square Pusher and his group Shoba Leader 1. And if you don't know those guys, that's a live band that plays a really aggressive mix of drum and bass, punk rock, jazz rock improv. They do it while wearing helmets and visors that are lit up like robots from the future. That's the show I saw at LPR, and I can't imagine any other standing room venue in New York presenting that kind of a bill. In a similar fashion to the way he curates Poisson Rouge, David started work on Life Like Violence with the intention of creating a whole new listening experience. This album taps into classical music, electroacoustic music, signal processing, improv, and remix culture, in a way that stresses, again, that tireless search for new ideas, new sounds, new collaborations. In that spirit, these 5 short films you're about to see continue that narrative. And actually, we're not done yet. The entire album is being remixed by a squad of ace record producers, DJs, remixers, including Kid Koala and others. But anyway, for these 5 short films, David recruited an area of talent here, a stellar group of filmmakers, videographers, animators to achieve his vision for this project. I think you're really going to like it. The program runs about 35, 40 minutes. And then after the screening, David's going to be joined up here by the esteemed music journalist, Steve Smith. You've undoubtedly seen his byline in the New York Times, New Yorker, Boston Globe, heard his voice on National Public Radio. I also like to say that Steve was my ever-capable and encouraging editor at Time Out New York back in the day. And perhaps a little-known fact, he's also an incredibly erudite scholar of the history and recorded output of King Crimson. So ask him anything. All right. Sorry, Steve. Last, as we get ready to roll, I just want to thank David for bringing this project to us. I want to thank his manager, Fritz Myers. Man, the work you've done covering every angle to roll this out, it's just been incredible. I mean, this started in January, rolling out digital singles for the album. Just a really incredible amount of work that you guys have done. Also, I'm not sure if he's here, but I want to thank Stuart Wolferman, who's been ably assisting with publicity on the project. And now, as they say, without further ado, this again is David Handler's Life Like Violence. Thank you.
Wow. I don't know. I kind of don't want to talk.
All right, we go home.
Which is rare for me. So Bill spilled the tea earlier about who I am, but again, I'm Steve Smith, and I've had about 30 years of experience in the musical ecosystem here in this city, and about 25 years of it spent as a writer and an editor and a professional listener, more than anything else. And in all that time, I would say I've met only a handful of people who've sort of fundamentally changed the city and what's possible in the city. This is where I'm going to put my glasses on and admit that I have notes here just to remind myself. And I really consider David to be one of these people, and I'm still discovering how true that is. Part of it, as you heard before, is that he was among the founders of Le Poisson Rouge, which was a revolutionary arrival in this city. It still is, but at the time that it landed, I can think of no other place that accommodated such a breadth of disparate musics under one roof and on one stage. I can't think of any other place where you could see Meredith Monk one night, Anthony Braxton the next night, and Napalm Death the third night, literally. And that all-embracing welcome very much was a part of the sort of aesthetic that was forming within the city and had been forming for some time. In that sense, Le Poisson Rouge is very much a close sibling to Bang on a Can, under whose auspices we're all here tonight as well. So it's a real privilege for me to get to sit here and talk to David in these circumstances. David, the composer and the performer, I've only been getting to know much more recently, as I suspect have many of you, because the emphasis was elsewhere. Now it is rightly turned to David's music, David's creativity. I realized very late in the game that I had had a bit of a preview because I heard the big piece, Rice Boy Sleeps, that Yonsei and Alex Sommer put together for Lincoln Center and elsewhere, which David had a huge hand in orchestrating for a version that traveled all over the world. So again, hats off. It's really nice to meet David,
Steve.
the composer and the musician. And I wanted to start by asking, all of the music that you've heard tonight is David's, and a lot of the actual playing that you've heard is also David. There are a couple of ensemble pieces on this album, but most of it is just David. So you are a musician conventionally trained in what we think of as collaborative music, chamber music. How did you come to conceive and then create this piece that is almost, this album that is almost entirely solo?
That's a good question. I think LPR being such an inherently social and collaborative experience, or the bringing about of LPR and its namesake's ensemble LPR a few years later, a nightclub and an orchestra, lots of people at both, or hopefully, and I think that finding the time for my own voice and the space for my own voice involved removing myself from that environment, or those environments, literally and figuratively.
Right.
And so it meant a withdrawing in a way, which was it was not intentional that I be alone doing it, but it worked out that way. And I think in many ways, LPR and the orchestra were a response to the solitude of the training as a musician, and then my return to music became one that was pretty solitary as a response to all of the immersion that was so involved and so communal at LPR. So response and then counter response, I guess I would say.
Counterpoint. Exactly. Yeah. So the title, Life Like Violence, is awash in ambiguity, and part of that is simply just the title could be punctuated a few different ways. It could be life like violence, or life, like violence. So what should we take the title to mean?
Oh, whatever you want, I guess. But I think that was part of the reason why I didn't want to be particular about it or specific about it. And as I think, when Bill was referring earlier on in his introduction to I think I referenced the pieces, or the album as like the sound of my psyche, or the idea of it's the tumult the everyday tumult of the mind. And I think we spend a lot of time trying to leave that space, and art or music, often I think of like a sound bath or ways that we listen to try to leave that place. But I think there's something inherently beautiful, or at least I tried to find something beautiful and make something beautiful out of that, the rub and the discord that's going on in at least my mind all the time. And so, not being particular about it being, I think it's on like video games and certain non-real things, although the lines are being blurred kind of like more and more now. But lifelike violence is usually a warning on a piece of media. That the violence could be so graphic that it's lifelike. Mm-hmm. And then the idea of life, just like violence, can, you fill in the blank. But so both had a sense of urgency. I didn't want to specify one versus the other because they're both pretty poignant to me. And it's sometimes fun to just leave it open.
We're also, we work in an area, broadly speaking, classical music, where we're used to large forms that have multiple movements. And so I want to clarify, is this one piece in multiple movements, or are these 5 disparate expressions?
These are 5 disparate expressions.
Okay.
Yeah. And their relationship to each other and to me kind of only revealed themselves after they had already been written. So I didn't set out to make an album and then write these 5 pieces. They had already been written. There's a kinship about them, and that they all do address fragility and decay and a lot of those things. And so for me, that became apparent after the fact, and very obviously so. And I think all of my music deals with mortality and decay, and in some way, but these in particular, and in a way that I thought interesting, and then wanted to pair them. So, yeah.
Sure. So then, what is the lifespan of the music we've just heard? But before we even get to the videos, just in terms of what is the span of creation from conception of these pieces to when you finally finished them, especially because you were mostly working alone?
Yeah, radically different depending on the piece. So I like when I have the luxury of doing it, I like to live with pieces for a long time and see how they change as I change. Some people do that with their entire catalog. I kind of like to do it with an entity like a piece. And so the piece itself I might live with and change, or the materials that I use. So the first track has my voice on it. It's not my story, but it's my sound, it's my speaking voice. And that's 20 years old. Like, those samples are 20 years old. And then their Solstice was an orchestral commission by the Naumburg Orchestral Concerts in Central Park. And so that was under the gun. Like, that was maybe 2 months to write, a large piece. The version that's on the album is as stripped down as it can be. There's another version that I look forward to releasing in June. That's like a 30 or 40 piece orchestra. It's live and outdoors in Central Park, so there's birds and other things that I think make the piece way better, but for the album it didn't belong. So, but that's an example of a piece that was done in kind of a white heat of, nothing like a deadline, but also, something that I felt needed to come out really quickly. And then some of the other pieces, the Lullaby was a piece that I wrote, a deliberately sparse piece for sleep. The idea that music can be so hypnotic, and it can, inspire a soldier to war, or a person to dance, or a child to sleep without any reference point, the way that a novel might, or the way that a film might. That hypnotic quality has always fascinated me. So I wrote that piece to be just a straight ahead lullaby, and then I started processing it beyond recognition, and really liked what happened when I lifted the veil. I kind of like how a piece functions when it comments on itself or responds to itself. So I'll have ideas that get assaulted by other ideas, or ideas that are revealed, that have been there all along. Like in Lullaby, there's all this noise, but then when the processing lifts, it's like a window opens, and then you just hear the unadorned melody in the piano, where it was all along, but you couldn't hear it.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, I'm incapable of fully escaping my music critic background,
Yeah,
and so I find myself looking for what is the thread that binds these disparate pieces together. You know, I'm on deadline, and I've only got 150 words. So
Yeah, right.
the thing that occurs to me about all of them, as diverse as they are, is just that every one of them contains some sort of tension. And I think about the tension, like the little irritant that an oyster feels, and so it protects itself by making a pearl. So you make something beautiful out of something that in some instances is outright painful or verges on violent. And so I just wondered about, is that tension something that you feel is intrinsic to how you approach making music?
Yeah, it is. And I've been thinking a lot about that lately, about whether or not, how healthy that is for me.
like violence.
For the shrink's couch, maybe more than up here. But I do think about it a lot. And I think that, yeah, I don't know. I think it up until now, it is intrinsic. It's something that is a part of my music making. I almost sometimes can't let a musical idea live without attacking it, which isn't to say that I ultimately don't let it live, but that struggle is, I think, can be a beautiful thing, and I try to make beauty from it or reveal it through music. But it's possible that the healthier I get, the less interesting my music will get. But I don't know. I hope that's not true. But it's. I think I don't sound like this already. Like the other thing about making an album that I didn't know, I've been on a lot of other people's albums, but I've never made one of my own,
Right.
Is how long it takes. And especially when you make, or at least for me it did, and especially if you make a film for each one, each is its own world and its own set of schedules and people to work with. And anyway, the result of that is that the time is such that my remove from this work, it's still very much me. But I think I already, the work that I'm writing right now already doesn't have quite as much of that violence in it. And maybe part of sending this off on a raft down the river is to just let it be what it is and maybe find a different way. But I think it's always going to be in there. I think it's in all of us.
Right.
So.
The contradictions are always there. And also, I mean, it's sort of intrinsic to the atmosphere that you've come up in as well, in terms of like, it's a reflection of what you did at LPR, where you had all of these disparate voices coming together, sharing a stage, sharing a community, and ideally sharing an audience.
Yeah, absolutely. I used to love, and still do, although I don't have a hand in booking anymore.
Right.
And thanks to Brett, Brett Tabasso is our music director. I don't have to, but that was and still is a great joy for us at LPR to do, and I think for Brett to do too, is pair seemingly incongruous things the same week, the same month, even the same evening, and play with that rub. And in many ways, these pieces fight with each other, and they're so different, and yet there is a common thread of that vulnerability, that scrape, or the fly in the ointment, whatever you want to call it, to all of them. But it manifests in different ways: large ensemble pieces, small pieces, longer ones. And yeah, I think that's kind of at work for me, just being exposed to such different music. I wanted to write like a waltz and a more straight ahead uptown classical orchestral piece. But then, there's this other music that's also rattling around in my head too. So
Right, exactly.
And at LPR, I think that probably enhanced. That was what LPR was built for, to be that eclectic.
Yeah.
But then it also made me more eclectic, I think, too, from just being there so much.
So now let's talk about piling another level of ambiguity and friction on top of that, which is that we've just sat through 5 short films that correspond to the music. So I want to clarify, first of all, is the music and the video meant to function together as one thing, or are they separate, equal-ish? I mean,
they're two different things. The music exists without the film, and did for a while until the films were made, and the film was made for the music. So in that regard, it's an inversion of like this film scoring process, which I think I've always been really fascinated by, like ever since I used to listen to a lot of big music as a teenager, Mahler and Bruckner and lots of Pink Floyd. And I remember going with my cousin to see the Pulse tour at Yankee Stadium when I was 14, and seeing this like really exquisitely made film that was really bizarre and really abstract, and seeing it paired with big opulent sound that almost had nothing to do with each other, that rub, or that the interesting accidents that happen or coincidences that happen when you're, you know, listening to music and playing something visual at the same time, I find more interesting often than music that was meant for a particular visual. And I think of like Stanley Kubrick, I was also obsessed with at that time, especially, you know, not having somebody score a film, but him pairing something seemingly incongruous like Blue Danube Waltz with outer space, or, yeah, and I think that's always been interesting to me, is like what happens if the film is cut for the sound, which I guess is music video, but I hadn't thought of it that way. And with a dear friend, we've been wanting to sort of explore that since we were teenagers, and I think that never really left me, was how to play with that relationship in a way that is generative without being so deliberate, and seeing what occurs. And sort of like that third roar of the lion when you start Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon and watch Wizard of Oz. I don't know if any of you have heard that myth, but what's beautiful in it is what you make out of it. It's absolutely not, I think that's been debunked for a long time, that if you start Dark Side of the Moon at the third roar of the lion in Wizard of Oz, that intentional things happen. And I think I think pretty much everyone has decided that was never true. But what your mind does to fill in the blanks is fascinating and sometimes infinitely more interesting than when it's super deliberate. So I don't know if that answered your question.
No, it does. And so I wanted to then segue to, what is your role in conceiving and executing these 5 disparate films? You worked with filmmakers, but what did you give them?
Also really depended on the film. So the Lullaby is an example of one where like I stayed so far out of the way. So I should say, before talking about anything about the films, my partner in crime, utterly and completely, was Tafat Tawil on all of them. And without her, it would have been an entirely different situation, and I'm so proud of these, and I hope you are too, T. So she directed 2 of them, we co-produced 4 of them, and we worked with very different voices, very different visual, languages. We knew we wanted to have live action, we wanted to have animation. The Solstice film is the one that I made without Tafat, and it was made really early and works well as a collage of sort of found footage because it's such a long piece. I mean, it's not long by classical music standards, but to make a film out of it. And the others, we fell in love with Tafat found this guy who I fell in love with his work, an animator, I think he exclusively makes things by hand, in France. And we approached him to work with him, and he was still doing his dissertation or something. He was still in school, so he couldn't take it on. And then because all the other films took so long, we just kept going back to him, and he wound up being one of the last. And by then he was out of school.
And this one was Lullaby.
Lullaby, sorry, yes.
Yeah.
And his language was so beautiful visually that we gave him very little direction. I mean, there was some sync stuff that I obsessed about at the end of the process. But we really let him do a lot. Conceptually, even when we would hand things over, conceptually, nothing was ever handed over. He came up with a beautiful idea to make it basically for the sleepless, like just a film about people who can't, the insomniacs, basically. And then with the animals, there was so many great, beautiful ideas. We just said, like, let's just let this guy do his thing and see what happens. And so then we got involved at the end in the way we needed to, but it was beginning and end. Otherwise, we were fairly hands-off. And then Ever After, as a completely opposite scenario, we started talking about concepts for that like 3 years ago. And this was the 3rd or 4th concept that we landed on. And then it was, we did, being in it was definitely different. At that point, I hadn't been in any of the other films. And so that was an example of being very hands-on. And then Lullaby would be an example of not. And then it was a lot in between. So, yeah.
Now I want to ask for a time check, because I want to make sure that we leave enough time that you get to ask questions too. This is not all about me. So how are we doing? Now? Well, I mean, all I was going to do is start breaking into every one of the films one by one.
We can still do that.
I feel so
also-
different having seen them on a big screen now.
Yeah, it is very different. It's different for me too, actually.
Yep.
Just before we do that, and in case we don't have too much more time, I just want to acknowledge a few people. I mean, Tafat, I just mentioned, is here. Just such a joy and such a pleasure to put things together and work together with you. It wouldn't have happened any other way. Also, Larissa Baseman, who's in Ever After on screen with me, is here as well. And I know that Andrew Zimbelman, who was the animator for Life Like Violence, I mean, navigating that territory of the mind, which that piece, I think, is intended to do the most, doing that in a visual way was so ambitious. And I think Andrew did an amazing job. And then just also to all of you, I feel like, very held in this moment right now, and that the work is really held in a beautiful way, and it could be otherwise if not for all of you. So thank you. And yeah, thanks. And then maybe we I think have a mic to pass around, or somebody can just speak loudly. I think we have a few minutes more, right?
Bill has a microphone.
Bill's
There's a
got a
hand up
mic.
over on this side.
There you go. For the video, we can, this gentleman we're at.
Thank you.
Price is right. Come on.
Okay, so I know Brooklyn pretty well. I'm an arts journalist who's always bicycling around Brooklyn. I apologize for not recalling the title of the film, where you begin by you're making coffee in some new apartment building.
Ever After, the last.
Ever After,
Yeah.
okay. And then it's you're walking around and you end up on a beach, and I'm wondering with Driftwood. Now I go to Fort Hilton often, but I don't think that's the beach. And I'm wondering, what is that beach with a lot of driftwood?
It's a lot further than Brooklyn.
Okay.
Really-
So that's it. So that's the
You must
answer.
have
It's
been
not in the
racking
New
your
York
brain.
City area.
No, it's not. It's a place called Jekyll Island, and I recommend going to
Okay,
it. It's in Georgia, or it's outside of Atlanta, so presumably still Georgia. Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, David,
Yeah.
guess what? I love you.
Thank you.
I want to hear,
That's a nice thing to hear. Thank you.
Yeah.
what's your inspiration? What inspires
That's
you?
my inspiration.
Really? Honestly.
Honestly, getting out of the dirt, getting out of the muck in my mind, and sometimes putting it out helps me get out, and I don't know, maybe puts everybody else back in, but feels good for me. No, and it makes it peace. Like I make peace with my darker side through music, and
What do you feel is going to happen with that?
well, we'll see. I'm on the other side of a lot of it, so. But thank you for your love and for your question.
Thank you, David. One of my family's name is David.
All right.
Welcome home, D.
Thank you.
I just had a question about the, I believe it was the second piece with all the found footage.
Yeah.
Was that just
Solstice, yeah.
ripped off YouTube, or because you obviously aren't going to go license all that stuff?
Yeah, so it's all it's all public domain. It's
interesting.
all legit.
Cool.
But it's all found footage.
Yeah,
Michael
yeah.
Sharp, who directed it, isn't here, and it's not because it wasn't legit footage. He's not running.
Right. He's hiding.
I'm just not going to show.
Yeah.
No, it was all he brought in. I mean, that's 15 minutes worth, and he brought in, probably almost 10 times that, and we just
Yeah.
culled it together. And
Cool.
And yeah, I don't know. I guess there's banks that you can go to for found footage that you don't have to pay for.
Yeah, it's so
that's not
interesting.
licensed.
Yeah.
And some of it we did, I think, have to pay for, where it was like, if we really want this image, but
Yeah.
it was relatively
Nominal.
speaking like peanuts. So it wasn't much.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think it really, I can't imagine that working any other way, because the arc of the piece is pretty long. Not to say you can't make a film that long, but silent and to go with the music, it was on a budget like I was on. It was kind of the only way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for
Cool.
the question. Yeah.
My impression of that one is that there were so many instances of both man-made beauty and natural beauty, but then there's always these insertions of the potential for violence or the potential for loss. And I wondered, does that tie into the piece itself?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
totally. And the violence could be like, a gun in front of a green screen, or like a simulated image of a person, but
Lifelike.
very lifelike. Yeah, exactly. And then there's some that maybe doesn't look violent to the next person. Some of like the images that could be somebody's Instagram story or somebody
That's right.
doing whatever that feel violent to me, but like I don't know, maybe it doesn't to everybody. But and there's different images that I think conjure hostility in different ways.
Yeah, and the cyclical nature kind of made me feel like this is just life. This is life on the screen.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think for that, what was really important to me was showing like very minute, but not very intimate, personal detail. The drip of the man in the hospital or something, but really close, like very uncomfortably close, and then something super zoomed out. Okay. That is spatial or terrestrial or whatever. Yeah. So.
Bill's got another.
Yeah.
Hi, David.
Hi.
Yeah, it's you recognize my voice.
Hello, I
suspect.
do. Yes, I do. Hi, Aditya.
So, thanks very much for your questions. It's made me realize a very important thing about my friend and artist here. What would you say that I've seen you for a long time as a friend and as an artist confront discordancy in the search for in search for a chord, and I realize that's a bit of a pun there, but confronting discordancy seems to be a theme. Would you agree?
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like the confronting it as part of the work is really important to me. Like I could confront it and then resolve it and then make that the work. But to me, the work has to have both in it. So like I will wrestle with my own impulse to write something that feels very, that comes out rather fluidly or rather easily. And then it's too referential or there's something about it that to me, I have too much to say about it or too much to wrestle with. And so rather than do that separately, usually it is a part of the arc of the piece. And then either the idea, sometimes it gets beaten into submission and sort of, and then other times it survives. Like with the Sunblood Sky, the piece with the wrestlers, like that's written in a style of music that I love and that I know how to write in. But I don't feel like I can write in 2025 that way. I mean, Schubert already did, so but I still want to write that way. And my conflict with not being able to, or maybe it's more of an opportunity to wrestle with the pure idea and seeing whether or not it can survive, is to assault it with these machine sounds. But ultimately, in the case of that piece, the idea perseveres. Like the heart-on sleeve melody, like it just keeps going, and it gets beaten by this machine sound, but ultimately it doesn't stop and it doesn't get softer and it doesn't change. And that kind of monologue or dialogue or whatever you want to call it, whether it's, to me is fascinating. It's like character development or storytelling, but through music writing. I'm not saying the result is fascinating, but making it is fascinating to me. I really enjoy that.
But it is, and we talked about this also in advance too, is that you realize when you're watching the film that you're about to see wrestling, you're about to see something that is violent and difficult and painful, and yet when you see those two bodies in motion, you can't help but also see it as incredibly erotic and amorous.
And
they're
it's gorgeous.
dancing, and that goes along with the fact that you have this very unambiguously written music for piano and violin,
Yes.
but then you keep interrupting it with those incursions. I tell you, when I was watching it, I wrote down, I said, David, do you mistrust beauty?
That's a good question. Yeah. Yeah, I do.
There's one question, right? Yeah.
David, you talked about being obsessed with decay, or not obsessed,
Yeah.
fascinated.
Fixated, whatever.
And I think that, decay is the passage of time, and a lot of musicians probably would agree that music is about the passage of time.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, like, especially in Solstice, I saw just like a winding passage of time in the way that it reversed. Can you talk a little bit about that?
In the way that the film reversed, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a really good question, and I didn't. I think I'd probably have to think about it longer than I have right now to answer. But so the fact that the film splits in the middle and runs retrograde is not, the music doesn't, and that he did that with the film, I thought was really captivating and invites the person into the passage of time, I think, in a cool way, because I think you become, right, it depends. I don't know when you became aware of that it started running backwards, but when it does, and then you start to anticipate the stuff that started at the beginning, hopefully transformed by the music that's happening in the second half versus what's in the first half. There's that like deep, like almost dub-like club thing, that cha, that really dark stuff in the middle, that I think, in the music at least, changes everything after. And so looking at the same images a second time around, I think inherently does give you a sense of the passage of time, and hopefully it's effective watching it in reverse order, because by then the music is actually, that I think is a very optimistic piece. Like, it ends, to me at least, in a very open, it just takes off in a way that in the beginning you just feel like this guy's never going to give this a chance. Like, it's going to get brutalized, or there's the grind sound, or that deep bass thing that comes in the middle. And I wanted it to feel like hope at the end, that but yeah, it's very narrative almost all the time for me. Yeah.
I have a housekeeping question, if you will.
Yeah.
So you first wrote this music,
Yeah.
and then you began working with filmmakers, or maybe the filmmakers, because they worked and we all put together, and we experienced the 5 films together
Yeah.
as a composite whole. But the film said it was going to be an album, and a fine LP.
Yeah.
But will it be available as a package, I guess, to stream, where it's not just the sounds of your music, but also with the film, because this is very powerful, and I'm sure not the
glad.
only person in this room. It's great to see it all over again.
Awesome. That's great. Yeah, you can do that. The last film that you saw, the one that you referenced with the coffee in the interior of the home, that one is going to come out when the album drops on the 16th of May. But the other 4 are available now, and they're on my YouTube channel. In terms of a physical package for it, we don't have plans for that. But if the numbers continue to look really good on YouTube and we feel like that's viable, I am a big fan of seeing things in physical form, and like being able to hold, like I worked really hard on that vinyl package, because to me, like, the artifact or like the physical thing still matters. And so, yeah, right. So basically right now the films are on the video equivalent. They're on YouTube. So just, cast them on a big screen, and that's as good as I can do for now. But we might think about maybe making like a disc version that's like really crisp, and yeah, then I can obsess even more about how that package looked. Sure. Sure.
Got time for one more question, if there is one, or?
Oh,
Yeah.
right down front.
First of all, congratulations.
Thank you.
And I was just wondering, if I'm wrong to assume that some of your influence in some of your pieces were influenced by David Lynch?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I love David Lynch.
Yeah, so do I.
Yeah. That's a short answer, I guess, but yes, I do.
To the point.
No, I think what's remarkable about like his career and who he was his ability to reach people on a popular level and still be uncompromisingly bizarre. And I feel like that's something, but not like self-consciously, but just without any apology. And that's rare. In most art forms, it's hard to do. Like, I feel like fashion maybe sometimes does that. The stuff that people don't actually wear on the street. I don't know what you call that, but when you see these videos of people walking the runway with something that's just like unearthly thing that you would never wear, like that's unapologetically bizarre. And like, so maybe in fashion, but I feel like in music, it's not really. I don't know, it's a hard line to toe, where you're actually listened to by a large group of people, but also uncompromising about the voice that you. And I served on his board for the Transcendental Meditation, the David Lynch Foundation, and he was that genuinely all the time. So he's definitely a hero of mine, for sure. Awesome. Thank you all so much for being here.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining.
Give it back.